I stared at the stranger smiling above my fireplace and felt 30 years of love erased in a single afternoon. My living room, once warm with the hum of family dinners, now felt like a museum invaded. The mantel, polished to a soft gleam, held a glossy 8x10 photo in a gaudy gold frame. Barb, Nicole's mother, grinning with perfect teeth and a sun hat tilted just so. My photo, the black and white one of me and Tom on our wedding day, was gone. My fingers brushed the wood, tracing the faint dust outline where our frame had sat for decades. I could still see it in my mind. Tom's shy grin, my veil catching the breeze, both of us young and certain forever was ours. Peter, our son, had placed it there himself, after Tom's funeral, his hands careful, his voice thick. "This stays, Mom," he'd said. Always. The memory stung, sharp as the lemon polish hanging in the air. I lifted Barb's photo, heavy and cold, and turned it over. No note, no explanation, just her face, claiming space that wasn't hers. The floor creaked behind me. Nicole swept in, humming a tune I didn't know, her ponytail bouncing like she hadn't a care. She wore yoga pants and a bright pink top, her phone tucked in her waistband. "Oh, Ruth, you're up early," she chirped, not looking at me, grabbing a mug from the kitchen counter. The casualness of it burned. Did she think I wouldn't notice that I'd let 30 years of my life be swapped out like a thrift store trinket? I set Barb's photo down, my hands trembling, not from age but from the ache of betrayal. This house, my house, held every laugh, every tear, every Christmas morning when Peter tore into presents under Tom's proud gaze. That photo wasn't just a picture. It was us, our story, carved into this home's bones. Nicole's humming grew louder, careless, as she poured coffee. I wanted to ask her why, to demand where my frame was, but my throat tightened. I wasn't ready to hear her lie. The mantel clock ticked, each second louder than the last. I glanced at the empty space again, the dust outline like a scar. Nicole sipped her coffee, oblivious, her eyes on her phone. My chest tightened, a mix of grief and fury. What kind of woman walks into her mother-in-law's home and erases her? I needed to know what else she'd changed, what else she'd dared to touch. But as I turned toward the hallway, a glint of something familiar caught my eye, half hidden behind a stack of magazines. My own son looked through me as if I were already a ghost. I stood in the living room, the air thick with Nicole's coffee and that sharp lemon polish, my heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Barb's garish frame gleamed on the mantel, mocking me. I took a breath, steadying my voice, and turned to Nicole, who was scrolling her phone on the couch. "Nicole," I said, soft as I could manage, "why is my wedding photo gone? Why is Barb's picture up there instead?" She didn't look up right away. Her thumb paused, then flicked across the screen. "Oh, Ruth," she said, her voice light, like she was commenting on the weather. "Barb's picture brightens the room. That old black and white was so dated, we needed something current." Her words landed like a slap, casual but cutting. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the kind that comes when someone dismisses your whole life in a sentence. Peter slumped in the armchair, his tie loosened, eyes glued to his phone. "Peter," I said, turning to him, hoping for an ally. "That photo was your father's and mine. You put it there." He glanced up, his face tired, lines deeper than a man his age should have. "Mom, it's just a picture," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Nicole's right. It's no big deal." His words hung there, heavy slicing through the promise he'd made after Tom's funeral. I stood frozen, my hands clasped tight to keep them from shaking. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I'd taught Peter to respect his elders, to honor what came before him. I could still hear his small voice, years ago, promising to take care of me after Tom passed. Now, he sat there, siding with her, his own mother fading into the background of my own home. I excused myself, my voice barely a whisper, and walked to the kitchen. The linoleum was cold under my feet. I gripped the counter, my knuckles whitening against the worn edge. The silence in the house was louder than ever. No laughter, no clatter of dishes from family dinners, just the hum of the fridge and my own uneven breaths. Nicole's flippant tone echoed in my head, and Peter's indifference cut deeper than I could name. I stared out the window at the backyard, where Tom used to push Peter on the swing. This house held us together once. Now it felt like a battleground. I needed to know what else Nicole had planned, what other pieces of me she'd try to erase. But as I turned to leave the kitchen, I heard the front door open and a familiar voice called my name. Every forkful tasted like surrender. The dining room, where my lace tablecloth once draped like a soft memory of my mother's hands, now screamed with Bob's gaudy floral runner, bright pinks and greens that clashed with the oak table Tom and I picked out 30 years ago. I'd spent weeks stitching that tablecloth, each loop a quiet prayer for family dinners to come. Now it is gone, folded away in some drawer, replaced without a word. I ran my fingers along the table's edge, feeling the grain, wondering when my home stopped being mine. Nicole bustled in, setting out plates for Sunday dinner, her voice loud as she praised Barb's casserole recipe. So much healthier than those heavy dishes. Ruth, she said, not looking at me, her smile sharp as a knife. My recipes. Tom's favorite meatloaf. The green bean casserole Peter begged for, as a boy, were outdated. She'd said last week. I bit my lip. The sting of her words, sharper than the onions I'd chopped for decades in this very room. Barb sat in my chair at the head of the table, her laughter filling the space where mine used to echo. I'd presided there for years, carving roasts, passing rolls, holding court as the heart of this family. Now I sat at the side, my plate small, my voice smaller. Nicole snapped selfies with her mother, their heads tilted together, the flash catching Barb's earrings. Peter ate quietly, his eyes on his plate, not noticing how my hands shook as I lifted my fork. The casserole was bland, all cream and no soul, nothing like the meals that had filled this room with warmth. I chewed slowly, each bite a reminder of what I'd lost, not just a tablecloth or a chair, but my place. The chandelier flickered above, casting shadows that danced across Bob's runner. I wanted to stand, to demand my chair back, to tell Nicole this was my home, but the weight of their laughter pressed me down. I glanced at the empty buffet where my crystal vase used to sit, another piece of me, gone. I wondered what else Nicole had tucked away, what other parts of my life she'd deemed unfit. As I pushed my plate away, the doorbell rang, and a familiar voice called out, promising answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. They didn't just take my picture, they started locking away pieces of my soul. I stood in the guest room, the air stale with dust and disuse, staring at a drawer that used to slide open with ease. My jewelry, box treewood carved with roses, holding my mother's pearls and the gold band Tom slipped on my finger, was inside, but the drawer wouldn't budge. A new lock gleamed, small and smug, its keyhole mocking me. I tugged harder, the wood creaking, my heart thudding with a mix of disbelief and dread. I found Nicole in the kitchen, wiping down counters with that same lemon polish. "Why's the guest room drawer locked?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my hands shook. She didn't pause, her clothes moving in tight circles. "Ruth, it's for safekeeping," she said, her tone light, like she was talking about storing old towels. "That box is valuable, you know, valuable." The word burned. Those pearls held my mother's laughter, her stories. That ring carried Tom's vows. They weren't just valuable, they were me. I turned to Peter, who was grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Peter, can you get the key?" I asked, my voice softer, pleading. He nodded, distracted, his eyes on his phone. "Sure, Mom, I'll find it," he said, already walking away. Days passed, and he never mentioned it again. I checked the drawer each morning, hoping, but the lock stayed firm, a tiny jailer guarding my past. That night, I lay awake, the house silent except for the faint hum of the furnace. My mind catalogued every slight. The photo, the tablecloth, my chair, now this. Each one a cut, small but deep, bleeding away my place in this home. Anger stirred, no longer a flicker but a steady flame. I wasn't just losing things, I was being erased, piece by piece. While Nicole smiled and Peter looked away, I stared at the ceiling, my resolve hardening like frost on a window. I needed to act, to reclaim what was mine before it was all gone. But the next morning, a conversation with an old friend made me question how far Nicole's plans had already gone. Sometimes the first step toward justice is writing the truth in ink. Alice sat across from me at the kitchen table, her coffee steaming, her eyes sharp despite the lines etched around them. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, catching the empty spot on the mantel where my wedding photo used to be. Alice noticed it right away, her gaze lingering on Barb's garish frame. "Ruth," she said softly, setting her mug down, "what happened to your picture?" Her voice, warm but firm, cracked something open inside me, and the hurt spilled out. I told her everything: the photo swapped, the tablecloth gone, my chair taken, the locked drawer hiding my mother's pearls. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. Each word felt like a stone lifted from my chest. Alice listened, her hands folded, her face mirroring my pain. My daughter-in-law tried that once, she said, her tone heavy with memory. Rearranged my house, called my things old-fashioned. I let it slide until I couldn't. She leaned closer, her eyes locking on mine. Ruth, you document every single thing, every slight, every date. Don't let them rewrite your story. Her words sank in, steadying me. After she left, I found an old leather journal in my nightstand, its pages blank but waiting. I sat by the window, the house quiet except for the tick of the clock, and began to write. October 10th, Nicole replaced my wedding photo with Barb's. October 15th, my lace tablecloth vanished. October 20th, the drawer locked, no key. Each entry was a small rebellion, a way to hold on to what was mine. The pen felt heavy, but my hand was steady, the ink dark and sure. I closed the journal, hiding it under a stack of quilts. The act felt like a promise to myself, to Tom, to the life we'd built. Alice's voice echoed in my mind, her warning clear. I wasn't alone, not yet. But as I glanced at the mantel, Barb's smile taunting me, I wondered what Nicole would try next. And then I heard her voice in the hallway, planning something that made my heart stop. Turns out my late husband protected me better than my living son ever did. I sat in Margaret Klein's office, the air thick with the scent of old books and coffee, my hands clasped tight in my lap. The yellow pages had led me here, to a small law firm tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner. Its sign faded but proud. I'd slipped out while Nicole was at yoga, my heart racing like I was sneaking out of my own life. Margaret, with her sharp gray eyes and no-nonsense bun, leaned across her desk, listening as I spilled the story Barb's photo, the tablecloth, the locked drawer, Peter's indifference. I expected pity, but Margaret's lips curved into a quiet smile. Ruth, she said, pulling a file from a stack. Let's look at Tom's will. My breath caught. Tom's will, something I hadn't touched since the funeral. When grief blurred the words, she slid a document toward me, her finger tapping a paragraph I'd never noticed. This codicil, she said, grants you lifelong residency rights to the house. Peter inherited it in trust, but you can't be displaced. Not by him, not by Nicole, not by anyone. The words sank in, heavy and warm, like a quilt settling over my shoulders. Tom, even in death, had built a wall around me. I saw his face in my mind, that steady gaze he'd give me when life got hard. My eyes stung, but I blinked it away. Disrespect isn't just emotional, Margaret added, her voice crisp. Sometimes it's actionable. Keep documenting, Ruth, every detail. I nodded, my journal's weight in my purse suddenly heavier, a shield and a sword. I left her office, the autumn air sharp against my cheeks, my steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. I had a right to my home, my memories, my place. But as I turned the corner toward home, I saw Nicole's car in the driveway, and a new fear twisted in my gut. Every cruel giggle became evidence. I sat in my bedroom, the glow of my laptop casting shadows on the quilt Tom and I shared for decades. Alice's grandson, Tim, had come by that morning, his toolbox clinking as he installed tiny cameras in the living room and dining room, just for security. He'd said with a wink, his young face full of mischief. Alice had suggested it over coffee, her voice low, her eyes fierce. You need proof, Ruth, she'd said. I hadn't known how much I needed it until now. The footage played, grainy but clear. Nicole stood by the mantel, Barb beside her, both laughing. This place reeks of old lady smell, Nicole said, her voice sharp, waving a hand like she could swat my presence away. Barb's laugh was louder, a cackle that echoed off the walls I'd painted with Tom. Good thing we're freshening it up, she said, adjusting her photo's frame. My chest tightened, tears pricking my eyes, but they didn't fall. Each word, each smirk, turned my grief to steel. I paused the video, Nicole's face, frozen mid-laugh. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that hums with secrets. I thought of my journal, pages heavy with dates and slights, now backed by this proof of their cruelty. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to replay the clip, to memorize every syllable. I'd spent weeks swallowing their jabs, but this was different. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a campaign to erase me. Tim had shown me how to save the footage. His instructions simple, his grin proud. I clicked save, The file name October 22. My hands are steady now. My resolve is a quiet fire. I closed the laptop, the room dark except for the moonlight slipping through the curtains. I wasn't invisible, not yet, but as I slipped the laptop under my bed, I heard footsteps in the hallway, too light to be Peter's, and my heart skipped a beat. I addressed Nicole's envelope with the same pen I'd used to sign her wedding gift check. The ink flowed smooth on the heavy cream stock, each letter deliberate, my hand steady despite the pulse hammering in my throat. Sat at my dining table, Barb's garish runner, glaring under the chandelier, and wrote invitations for a surprise anniversary celebration of Tom's life. The words sounded warm, nostalgic, but my heart was a coiled spring. I invited the whole family, Peter, Nicole, cousins, aunts, and, of course, Barb. I wanted them all there, witnesses to what was coming. Nicole caught wind of it that afternoon, sweeping into the kitchen with a grin, her ponytail swinging. "A party, Ruth. I'll handle the menu," she said, already tapping her phone, planning hors d'oeuvres as if it were her event. I nodded, my lips tight, letting her pretend she didn't ask what I had planned, didn't notice the journal tucked in my lap or the fire in my eyes. She assumed the spotlight was hers, like she'd assumed my home was. I sealed her envelope, the wax stamp firm under my thumb, and handed it to her. "RSVP, please," I said, my voice calm, almost sweet. I mailed the others that evening. The post office was quiet, and the clerk's smile was kind. Each envelope carried away Tom's memory, my resolve, the years I'd poured into this family. I imagined their faces when they read it, picturing the dining room filled again with voices, not laughter but reckoning. My fingers brushed the last envelope, addressed to Barb, her name sharp against the cream paper. I dropped it in the mailbox, the metal clank finally, like a door locking. Back home, I tucked the journal under my pillow, its pages thick with truth. The house felt different now, not defeated but waiting, like me. Nicole's voice drifted from the living room, planning centerpieces, oblivious. I let her dream, let her think she was in control. But as I turned out the light, a phone call from Margaret Klein changed everything I thought I knew about the fight ahead. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt, because tonight the frame wasn't the only thing getting flipped. The dining room buzzed with 30 voices, cousins and aunts laughing over clinking glasses, the chandelier casting a warm glow across Barb's garish floral runner. My table, once a stage for my stories, now groaned under Nicole's platters of fussy appetizers, tiny quiches and shrimp, skewers she'd bragged about all week. I stood at the far end, my fingers brushing the stem of my wineglass, watching Nicole premiere the microphone stand we'd borrowed from Alice's church group. She tapped the mic, her pink dress catching the light, and the room hushed. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate," she said, her voice bright, practiced. "This house, our home, wouldn't shine without Mom, Barb, for inspiring us to make it beautiful." Barb, seated in my chair at the head of the table, beamed, her earrings glinting. The guests clapped, some nodding, others glancing at me, their smiles faltering. Peter stood beside Nicole, his face proud, his eyes avoiding mine. My chest tightened, the air thick with the scent of shrimp and betrayal. My wedding photo was still missing, Barb's glossy 8x10 reigning on the mantel like a false queen. I'd checked the guest room, the attic, every cupboard, nothing, but I'd prepared for this night, my journal heavy with dates, my laptop hiding footage, my heart armed with Margaret's words. I stepped forward, raising my glass, my voice steady despite the pulse hammering in my throat. "I'd like to say something," I said, loud enough to cut through the murmurs. Nicole's smile flickered, but she handed me the mic, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. The room turned to me, faces familiar and kind, the family I'd fed and loved for decades. I saw Tom in their eyes, his warmth, his strength. My smile held, but it wasn't soft, it was sharp, a blade honed by weeks of slights. "Tonight," I began, my voice clear, "we're here to honor Tom, this house, and the truth it holds." A few heads tilted, curious. Nicole shifted, her fingers tightening on her glass. I paused, letting the silence stretch, knowing every word I said next would shift the ground beneath her feet. But before I could continue, a cousin's question from across the room caught me off guard, threatening to unravel everything. Silence fell heavier than Sunday pot roast. I flicked the switch, dimming the chandelier, and the room's chatter dissolved into a hush. The projector, borrowed from Alice's grandson, hummed softly on the sideboard, its light slicing through the dimness. I pressed play, my fingers steady, though my heart thumped like it hadn't since Tom's funeral. The screen flickered, and there it was, security footage, from the living room, grainy but undeniable. Nicole, tossing my lace tablecloth into a box, her voice sharp. This old rag, she won't notice. Barb, beside her, pocketing my silver candlesticks, her laugh, a low cackle. Gasps rippled through the dining room. Aunt Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Cousin Ed leaned forward, squinting, his fork frozen midair. Nicole's face, lit by the projector's glow, drained of color, her pink dress suddenly garish against her pallor. Peter, beside her, turned ashen, his eyes darting from the screen to me, then back again. The footage rolled on, Nicole sneering, "This place reeks of old lady's smell," while Barb adjusted her photo on the mantel, smirking. Every cruel word, every careless gesture, played out for the family to see, a parade of their disrespect. I stood still, the mic heavy in my hand, watching the room absorb the truth. The air smelled of shrimp and shock, the kind that lingers when lies unravel. Nicole opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes wide, searching for an escape. Barb shifted in my chair, her earrings no longer glinting, her confidence crumbling. I didn't speak, didn't need to. The footage was my voice, my journal brought to life, each frame a testament to the pieces of me they'd tried to erase. Peter's hand gripped the table, his knuckles white. I wanted to feel sorry for him, but the sting of his indifference held me back. The screen went dark, the projector's hum fading, but the silence screamed louder than ever. I met their eyes, one by one, my family, my witnesses. But then Nicole stood, her chair scraping, her voice trembling with something I hadn't expected: defiance. The house my husband built suddenly had a backbone again. I held up the trust document, its pages crisp under the chandelier's light, my voice steady as I read the codicil aloud. "I have irrevocable residency in this home until my death," I said, my words cutting through the dining room's stunned silence. Any attempt to displace me voids Peter's inheritance, redirecting it to the county women's shelter. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, but my resolve didn't. Tom's foresight, written in black ink, was my shield, his love protecting me long after he was gone. Nicole shrieked, a sharp, jagged sound that made glasses clink on the table. "This is ridiculous," she spat, her face flushed, her eyes wild. Peter stared at me, his mouth open, the projector's afterglow still haunting his face. Barb pushed her chair back, her earrings jangling as she stood, muttering about needing air, but Alice, dear Alice, was already at the door, her small frame blocking the exit, her smile sharp as a blade. "Stay, Bob," she said, her voice sweet but unyielding. "You'll want to hear this." The room held its breath, 30 pairs of eyes on me, the family I'd fed and loved, now witnesses to my stand. The document felt heavy, not with paper but with truth. I'd been erased my photo, my tablecloth, my chair, but Tom's will gave me back my place. Nicole's hands clenched, her defiance crumbling under the weight of the codicil. I saw fear in her eyes, maybe for the first time. I lowered the paper, my gaze steady, the house around me alive with Tom's strength. But as I opened my mouth to speak again, Peter's voice, hoarse and broken, stopped me cold. "Some doors you lock from the inside to keep the poison out." The morning sun slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, painting the living room in a warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. Upstairs, suitcases zipped and floorboards creaked. Nicole and Barb packing, their voices low, hurried. I stood by the mantel, my fingers brushing the familiar frame of my wedding photo. Tom's shy grin restored to its rightful place. The dust outline, once a scar, now felt like a badge, proof I'd reclaimed what was mine. The air smelled of coffee, not lemon polish, and the house breathed easier. Peter waited on the porch, his breath visible in the crisp dawn air. I stepped outside, the wood cold under my slippers, and met his eyes red-rimmed, pleading. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking, hands stuffed in his pockets like the boy who'd broken my vase years ago. "I didn't see what she was doing. I'll make it right." His words hung there, heavy with regret, but they couldn't erase the weeks of silence. His gaze sliding past me while Nicole erased my life. I listened, my heart aching for the son I'd raised, but my resolve was stone. "Peter," I said, my voice calm, "you chose her side too long." His face fell, and I saw Tom in him, the man who'd never have let me fade. I turned, closing the door, the lock clicking with a quiet finality. The sound wasn't loud, but it was mine. a choice to protect the home Tom and I built. Back inside, I ran my cloth over the mantel, wiping away the last traces of Barb's frame. My photo gleamed, the black and white edges sharp against the wood. The house felt lighter, like it was waking up. I straightened, my back stronger than it had been in months. But as I set the cloth down, a letter slid under the door, its handwriting too familiar to ignore. Love doesn't vanish, it just learns to protect itself. I climbed the stairs to Peter's childhood bedroom, the air heavy with the scent of cedar and memory. The envelope in my hand felt heavier than it should, stuffed with photos from long ago. Peter at 5, his small hand gripping mine as we walked to the park, his grin wide under a baseball cap. I laid it on his old bed, the quilt faded but still tucked tight, just as I'd taught him. My pen had scratched out a note, the words simple but sharp: I forgive you, Peter, but I won't forget. Sunday dinners wait if respect returns. I paused at the door, my fingers brushing the frame where he'd marked his height each year, pencil lines etched like promises. I saw him then, my boy, laughing as Tom tossed him in the air, the family we'd been before Nicole's shadow crept in. My heart ached, but it wasn't soft, it was guarded, a love that had learned to draw lines. I'd given him everything, but I wouldn't give him my dignity. Downstairs, I heard the front door open, then close. Peter's footsteps were slow, heavy. Climbing to his room, I stayed in the hallway, hidden, my breath shallow. I didn't need to see his face to know what came next. The rustle of paper, the catch in his throat. I pictured him, unfolding the photos, his fingers tracing the boy he'd been, the mother he'd let fade. His quiet sob echoed, a sound that cut but didn't sway me. He needed to feel this, to carry it, to understand what he'd risked losing. I turned away, the floorboards creaking under my weight, each step a reminder of the home I'd fought for. The envelope was my last word to him, a bridge not burned but barred until he earned his way back. I felt lighter, the weight of silence lifted. But as I reached the kitchen, a knock at the back door startled me, pulling me toward a conversation I hadn't planned. The table that once echoed disrespect now hums with second chances. I spread my lace tablecloth across the dining room table, its delicate loops catching the morning light, each stitch a quiet victory. Alice sat across from me, her smile warm, joined by 3 women from the women's shelter volunteers with kind eyes and stories etched in their faces. The air smelled of my resurrected recipes, Tom's favorite meatloaf, green bean casserole, the kind Peter used to beg for. The chandelier glowed softly, and laughter spilled out, curling around the room like it hadn't in years. I passed the rolls, my hands steady, the weight of Nicole's floral runner long gone. The shelter women shared stories of their own lost homes, reclaimed lives on. I listened, my heart full. Alice clinked her glass, toasting new beginnings, her voice steady as a friend's hand. I smiled, feeling the house breathe again, its walls no longer heavy with silence. My mother's pearls, freed from the locked drawer, rested warm against my collarbone, a reminder of who I'd always been. That afternoon, I decided to start something new, a monthly legacy lunch for senior women, a place to share stories, to hold space for our truths. I pictured this table filled again, different faces, same warmth, women, like me, guarding their legacies, refusing to fade. The idea felt like planting a seed in soil I'd thought barren. I jotted it down in my journal, the pages now less about slights and more about strength. The women lingered, their laughter a melody I'd missed. I glanced at my wedding photo on the mantel, Tom's grin, steady, grounding. The house was mine again, not just in law but in spirit. As we cleared the plates, Alice squeezed my hand, her eyes bright with pride. But as the last guest left, a familiar car pulled into the driveway, stirring a question I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't replace anyone, I simply made room for more. The mantel glowed under the afternoon sun, my wedding photo steady at its center, Tom's grin anchoring me as always. Beside it, a new frame gleamed, a photo of me surrounded by women from the shelter, their faces bright, each holding a small copy of my wedding portrait. Their hands, some wrinkled, some scarred, cradled the black and white image like a shared treasure. I'd written the caption myself, inked on a small card beneath. Love multiplies when it's defended. The words felt true, heavy with the weight of what I'd won back. I stepped back, my fingers brushing the lace tablecloth, now a permanent fixture again. The house smelled of fresh bread from the morning's legacy lunch, the air alive with echoes of laughter and stories shared. The women had crowded around me for the photo, their voices warm, calling me sister, friend. I saw myself in them, keepers of memory, women who refused to let their lives be erased. The frame wasn't just a picture, it was proof that my home, my heart, could hold more than pain. I adjusted the new photo, its edges catching the light. The mantle felt complete, not crowded, each frame telling a story of love that wouldn't bend. I thought of Nicole, of Barb, their absence, a quiet relief, and of Peter, who hadn't called since the letter. My heart twinged, but I let it pass. This house, this life, was mine to shape now, filled with voices that lifted me up. As I turned to tidy the dining room, I heard the mailbox clank outside, a sound that pricked my curiosity. I walked to the door, the floorboards warm under my feet, and found an envelope with no return address, its weight promising something I couldn't yet name. Your story isn't over at 65. Sometimes it's just getting its second printing. I sit in my chair, the one at the head of the table, its wood warm under my hands, the lace tablecloth soft beneath my elbows. The living room glows, my wedding photos steady on the mantel, Tom's grin catching the light beside the new frame, me with the shelter women, all of us holding that same black and white memory. The air smells of fresh coffee, not lemon polish, and the house hums with a quiet I've reclaimed, a peace I fought for. I look at you, right through this lens, and see women like me, mothers, grandmothers, keepers of stories. If someone dims your light, check the wiring. Sometimes it's in the will, sometimes it's in your heart. I learned that the hard way, watching my home, my life, nearly slipped through my fingers. Nicole thought she could erase me, but I found my voice, my proof, my place, that codicil, those cameras, this table. They reminded me I'm still here, still whole. You've got a story, too. Maybe it's a photo, a ring, a recipe you'd fight for. I want to hear it. Tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you'd stand up for, no matter what? Your words matter, just like mine did when I wrote them in my journal, when I stood before my family and spoke the truth. We're not invisible, not at 65, not ever. This house is alive again, filled with laughter from the legacy lunches, stories from women who've walked paths like mine. Next month, I'll share another tale, maybe about the letter in my mailbox, maybe about Peter's next step. Stick around, we're not done yet. I lean back, my pearls warm against my skin, the mantle glowing behind me. This is my home, my story, and I'm sharing it with you. So, tell me, what's the photo you'd fight for? I'm listening, and I know you're stronger than you think.